Now, at 20.52% in August, inflation is at its highest rate in Nigeria since September 2005, and it appears to be still rising. Food inflation rose to 23.12%, pushed up by increases in prices of bread and cereal, as well as potatoes, yam, fish, meat, oil, and fat. The experts are warning that it may spiral out of control, driving the cost of living crisis and bringing with it widespread hardships, particularly for those on low incomes who continue to be hardest hit. Nigeria's central bank is expected to further raise interest rates to try to control it, but with such a move may come higher loan defaults, which might put the banking industry at risk. So in those circumstances, what's the best way to try to bring soaring inflation under control and rein in rising prices? Well, that's the big question, isn't it? Which is why inflation and the cost of living crisis are likely to become key issues in the upcoming campaign and the presidential election in February next year. Well, for expert analysis, I'm joined now in the studio by the lawyer, political economist, and former deputy governor of the Nigerian Central Bank, Professor Kingsley Moghalu, who has severally declared his ambition to be president of Nigeria. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Well, thank you, Charles. First of all, I have to make clear that I am not running to be president of Nigeria at this time. So.
Yeah, not this time, but you've had the ambition, and I suspect the ambition is still there.
Well, I have had it in the past. I don't know about the future. Let's let the future take care of itself.
Well, let's talk about the big problem at the moment. What do you make of the latest inflation figure, 20.52%, the highest since September 2005?
Very troubling. I think it signposts, much more difficult times ahead for the country, because I do not see an immediate prospect of a reduction in inflation. It's driven by a lot of factors, increases in the price of food, what we call cost push inflation. When the prices of raw materials rise and producers of things have to raise their prices in order to maintain some profit. So you have a lot of this. You also have what we call structural inflation, which is aided by things like lack of infrastructure, issues like the Forex, the foreign exchange crisis. It's an import-driven economy. And so because the price of the naira keeps dropping, the prices of imported things keeps rising. So inflation is a phenomenon that you would expect to happen anyway over time. But what worries economists is when the price increases are not gradual and very slow and steady. When they spike up, then it becomes a problem. Otherwise, the price of things in 1950 cannot be the price of things today. So inflation is a natural phenomenon. It's just about when it's no longer happening in consonance with what we call price stability. So that's what's happening now. It has a lot of implications for us as a country. First of all, it's going to increase poverty. Because as many people, let's say pure water, the people who sell pure water or manufacture pure water, or the mama put, when they cannot buy beans, when they cannot buy yam to create, the kind of food that just people on the street buy and eat, they are going out of business. Their poverty is increasing. Many families can also not afford the price of bread or eggs or very basic things that give a balanced, healthy diet. So you have malnutrition. You have, of course, a loss of productivity across the whole economy. And then you have, therefore, a weakness of both the GDP, the gross domestic product, and GDP per capita, because unemployment also follows in its wake. So inflation is referred to as the most regressive tax on the poor. It's a very heavy tax. So it's something that has a lot of implications for Nigeria.
So when we hear about inflation, we need to take it very seriously.
It is a very, very serious phenomenon, especially when it spikes a lot. like you have in many countries of the world now.
Yeah, I was just going to say
Yes.
that inflation right now is a global problem. I mean,
Yes,
it's not limited to Nigeria.
Yes, absolutely.
But is the key question here what each country is doing to try to ameliorate the effects and reduce the impact on their
There
citizens?
you have it. Plus the fact that our own inflation is also, it's not mainly due to the global thing. It is due mainly to very specific domestic issues within the Nigerian economy.
Well, tell us about that.
Yes, well, of course, the forex issue.
Yeah.
So we are not a productive economy, and we are a one-product economy, and we depend on crude oil for most of our foreign exchange earnings. And so when the price of crude oil tanks, or when the production is low, for example, you have oil theft, stealing 1/3 of our petroleum production. You know, when you have those kinds of things, then you're not able to be, first of all, your books don't balance, and then you start getting indebted. You know, so all these things began to intertwine. So there are very unique factors to Nigeria. We know why there's inflation in the United States, and the Federal Reserve is handling it in the classical manner. They are raising interest rates to constrict the money supply so that there isn't too much money chasing too few goods. Because people in America have had a general increase in incomes in the past few years. That's not the situation in Nigeria. So
in those circumstances, from the point of view of the central bank, where you were deputy governor, the way to control inflation, I mean, the standard way to control inflation is by raising interest rates.
Yes.
But there are concerns that continuing to raise interest rates may bring higher loan defaults, which might put the banking industry at risk. That's just one concern.
That's one concern.
Is that a valid concern?
It is a valid concern, but you see, when you say raising interest rates, it's just one part of it. The general principle that central banks operate on is that when prices begin to get out of control, they have to contract the supply of money.
Right.
And that is done by a number of measures, including increasing the monetary policy rate, the rate at which the central bank lends to commercial banks, and that affects, of course, the rate at which they lend to the main economic actors. But the price of credit, of course, leads to a lowering of demand for it, and that reduces the supply of money in the economy. Right. The central bank will also do what we call open market operations, OMO, where they begin to say to you, come and invest in federal government securities at high interest rates, so there's an incentive for you to invest, but in investing, they're sucking in the cash in the economy. And they also do what they call CRR in the banks, you know. So there are a number of ways they do that. But yes, it is a valid concern about sometimes when tightening can lead to recession. You know, Nigeria has just gotten out of a recession. Some would argue it has never really gotten out of it in the last few years. And so if there's too much of a contraction, the country might tip into recession again because productivity is not going up, you know. So and then of course the stability of the banks.
Right.
But I believe the central bank will continue to, especially concerning financial stability.
Right.
I think the central bank will almost always be on top of that.
But is that the best way to bring soaring inflation under control in a country like Nigeria that has very unique characteristics?
You have asked a very, very brilliant question. Because some people have said that even the monetary tightening that is going on now is not really having the effect that it should. Although you should take note that there's what we call the lag effect. You know, these things take time to course through the economy, and it doesn't always happen at once. But there are people who are saying, look, we have far more fundamental problems, and we have passed the stage where simple monetary tightening by the central bank can actually affect Nigeria's inflation, because the inflation is so structural that we have to actually have deeper economic reforms. So, for example, you know, the central bank itself has to stop deficit financing of the federal government, because that's creating inflation. When you're lending the federal government 20 trillion naira in ways and means lending, first of all, it's illegal. Second, you're creating money to do so, and that's driving inflation. So should the central bank be creating inflation to serve political masters who are clueless about managing the economy, and then turning around to be raising interest rates? But if you don't address that fundamental problem of not giving the money illegally, then you will help reduce inflation. You see? So it's not just about interest rate raises. There are other approaches. The whole question of the forex. We must increase the supply of forex into Nigeria so that dollars will start chasing us. Nigeria's economy is very attractive to a lot of foreign investors. What drives them away is too much government control. It's too much arbitrage. You know, when you have multiple exchange rates, and some people can get it at government rate and go and sell it on the black market. It doesn't matter what anybody says, that happens. You know, when investors see these things, it chases them away. But in a country with 200 million people, there is a market. And so if you made the management of Forex a little bit freer and more transparent, you would have a surge of inflow of capital, and that could drive down the price of foreign currencies, and that could also help to stabilize our inflation.
It's very interesting, the analysis you give.
Yes.
I mean, I'm absolutely just amazed at your knowledge of these things. But obviously, I mean, you were deputy governor of the central bank. I mean, you're a professor of political economy and all the rest of it. What I'm trying to understand is, because you made that very interesting point about the Nigerian economy,
yes,
and the fact that it isn't your standard economy,
no,
therefore you don't apply standard methodology,
yes, exactly,
to it. I mean, but going back historically, why is the Nigerian economy the way that it is? Why is it all so sort of convoluted and so difficult to really kind of match to a sort of textbook economy? Where do we go wrong, if you like?
Yes, there are a number of reasons why Nigeria's economy has been bad for many decades. What is happening is simply a much more difficult iteration of what has been going on since 1980 or since late 1970s. The first problem is the absence of a clear economic philosophy. The balance between the state and the market has not been found well in Nigeria. And therefore, you have political leaders who have a tendency to use state power to try to manage the economy. You know, that has a bit of a problem. Then you have those who say that the market should be left to be free, totally free. The private sector will drive everything. Neither of those two extremes will work for Nigeria. But I favor what I call strategic capitalism, a developmental capitalist state in which the market largely drives the economic space.
Like what you have in Europe, in many countries,
well,
to some extent.
To some extent, but I think I wouldn't
like
go...
the Nordic countries.
Well, yes, but I wouldn't go as far as... Because those are welfare capitalist states.
Yeah, they are.
And their taxation is very high to be able to provide free education, free healthcare. People cannot pay those kinds of taxes in Nigeria. So what Nigeria should do is simply to make provision in terms of, welfareism for the old people. They are entitled to it. But we cannot run a huge welfare state because first you must generate.
So welfare needs to be limited to the aging
population.
Right.
Yes. Now, for the youth who are unemployed, you can have a transitional mechanism, but not for more than a year.
Right.
You can place them on some support, provided they go and train and get skills.
And if they don't get the jobs, or the jobs are not coming through, they'll have to retrain.
They'll have to retrain.
And do whatever is available.
Available, yes, to create jobs for themselves.
That's a good point.
Yes, so these are the kinds of things. So first of all is the matter of the balance between the state and the market. The second problem that comes from this is the absence of consistent economic policy. See, your policy must be anchored on a philosophy.
Yes, to make it consistent.
To make it consistent.
Yeah.
But have you seen that in Nigeria since the 1950s?
Well, there is no philosophy, is there?
There is no philosophy anymore in this country. They'll tell you you're blowing grammar. But go and look at Awo, go and look at Zik, go and look at the Sadana. They were philosophers.
Absolutely.
And that's why the economies they ran were productive, So even up to the 60s and even up to the mid-70s, we had strong philosophical thinking driving the Nigerian economy. So the oil boom came and shattered everything, and we became an easy go. We lived easy lives. So you have the philosophy issue, you have the policy issue, then you have the matter of corruption. Then you have the question of insecurity. Many parts of the country are not productive.
Farmers can't get to their farms. The oil
wells are
being
when you have
vandalized.
then you have the oil theft issue. Then you have the matter of the constitutional constraints on economic development in Nigeria. When you frame a state such that you say it's a federal state, but all the resources are owned by the federal government, right? And the revenues that come from there, they own it and distribute it to the different tiers of government. They distribute to the states every month. Commissioners of finance flock to Abuja for FAC meetings. What this has done is that it has automatically made the states lazy. They cannot be productive because there's something guaranteed, or so they think. Right now anymore, they're not getting those things, and that's why everybody's in a crisis. So you have
fiscal restructuring.
Yes, so you need fiscal restructuring, but you cannot do that without constitutional restructuring. Right. So the problem of Nigeria is not just a problem of pure economics. Then you have the problem of absence of nationhood. Why is this an economic problem? When you do not have people who think in a united way about their country and its ambition and its future, what happens is that the struggle for political power becomes simply a struggle to capture power to extract rent. So the oil, people move into the oil and use it as patronage for people from their part of the country or for their political cronies. So you have the absence of nationhood. So the problems of the Nigerian economy are not just rational economic equations. They are problems of political economy.
Well, I have to say that's a fascinating analysis.
Absolutely.
We've got about a minute before we switch to another topic.
Yes.
Do you expect this sort of analysis that you made, the structural problems within and historical problems of the Nigerian economy, as well as inflation, the cost of living crisis, to be key issues in the upcoming presidential election campaign?
They should be, because they are the only things that will get us out of the mess in which we are in.
Right.
I forgot to mention, of course, the very important matter of the oil doom. That is to say, we have become an economy reliant on oil for 90% of our foreign exchange. So therefore, the diversification of the Nigerian economy becomes an issue.
Flat.
Every government has talked about it. No government has done it.
Okay. Please stay with us, Professor Moghalu, because I'd like to get your reaction to the next story, and it comes from Kenya, where President William Ruto, who was sworn in on Tuesday, has taken decisive action to end fuel subsidies. And as a result, prices for petrol have now risen 12%, diesel has increased by 17%, and kerosene by 16%. And all this, of course, means higher costs for drivers, for transport, and for home cooking. Well, President Ruto said subsidies are a short-term solution which won't help solve long-term budget problems for the government. So how is this going to affect public transport operators and their customers? And what lessons might Nigeria learn from all this as it looks for ways to remove its own subsidy regime? And of course, Professor Kingsley Moghalu is still with me in the studio. Thank you very much indeed. What's your reaction to this decisive action taken by the Kenyan President William Ruto to end fuel subsidies just 2 days after he was sworn in?
That's what's called bold leadership. That's bold leadership, and that's a plus for him, quite apart from the fact that he's one of our in-laws. The family is married to a Nigerian family, so just
that's interesting.
On the lighter side. Yes, you might not know that his daughter is married to a Nigerian. But you see, if you look at Zambia and you look at Kenya, you will see what's lacking in Nigeria. Since Hakainde Hichilema came to power in Zambia, over the past 1 year, the country was, before he came, they were having huge economic problems. Within 1 year, things are stabilizing. Inflation is down. And Ruto is also grabbing the issue by the neck. Fuel subsidy, because now we have come into the matter of the fiscal mess of Nigeria, which is one part of the economic problem.
Absolutely.
But the part that bites us immediately. Now, there is no way Nigeria cannot remove petrol subsidy. We cannot survive as a country if we continue to pour 4, 5, 6 trillion every year into a scheme that many people know and have called a scam. It's not clear how many liters of petrol are used every day in Nigeria, and many of the claims are fraudulent claims. So my position has always been, and which is what is happening in Kenya, I have proposed that we must remove the petroleum subsidy, but we have to figure out a public transport subsidy regime. You see, subsidies, there is no economy that doesn't have some sort of subsidy or the other.
Yes.
The question is, what are you
and to what extent?
And to what extent?
Because that's a very good point, because
Yes.
the rationale behind President Ruto
Yes.
suspending the subsidies, even though it has a knock-on effect on transport and on prices in general and so on, is the fact that there should be some level of mitigation.
Of course.
What's the
For the
best
poor.
way to mitigate that knock-on effect in Nigeria, for instance, if subsidy is removed?
Let me tell you how. I believe that if the federal government brought out 500 billion from its current subsidy bill or its yearly subsidy bill and worked out a scheme with the 36 states of the federation where they provide subsidized transportation in rural areas and in urban areas for the poor. This will not cost more than 500 billion. That's a fraction of 6 trillion every year. That leaves you with 1.3 billion to pay ASU and fix your university system.
Yeah.
That leaves you with another 1 trillion you can invest in healthcare. That leaves you with another 1 trillion you can invest in developmental things. So the petrol subsidy is killing this country. It's not about sentiment. Now, many of the people who are benefiting from petrol subsidy are rich people who are driving Jeeps, SUVs, and you're subsidizing petrol for them. How many poor people own cars, in truth? So most of the subsidy is actually going to the wrong people.
Yeah.
If you target the people who are poor and you provide some sort of subsidized public transportation for them, that would be a far better investment, and it will cost you a fraction of what you're wasting.
But there's
and then
been
having to borrow money,
Right.
and we have a huge fiscal deficit every year.
But what about if you do that? What happens to the people who are transporters? Because it's been suggested in Kenya, for example, that public transport services, the matata, or what they call them.
Matatus,
The
The Moghalu.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That affect a bigger percentage of the population and are a great tool of economic growth.
Of course.
Should be given special treatment on subsidies.
Yes.
So the prices aren't passed on to the consumers,
Exactly.
those same poor people that you're talking about,
Exactly.
as opposed to personal vehicles that should have subsidies. Because
I don't believe in personal vehicles having subsidies.
yeah, well, obviously,
It is
that's
about-
what they're talking about doing
Exactly.
in Kenya, phasing that out.
Yes, exactly.
But subsidizing the people who run public transport
Yes,
vehicles,
yes.
as well as providing the sort of public transport that you're talking about,
yes.
like buses and so
Yes.
on and so forth.
All that can be looked at.
Right.
The details, the devil is in the details, but the details are very possible to achieve. But the important thing is that if you target a subsidy, in Western countries, the government subsidize agriculture. So they cannot come out and tell us that no, but what you do in Asia, the government subsidized manufacturing and economic productivity so that the countries were encouraged to become export-oriented economies. Those subsidies were phased out over time because market conditions allowed for them to be phased out. The
Profits were coming in.
Profits were coming in, and therefore rebalancing could take
Absolutely.
place. But this takes a competent state, a competent economic management,
And a competent lead.
and a competent political leadership to achieve over time. So part of the problem we also have in Nigeria is just an absence of knowledge from our political elite. They're not economically literate, most of them. And even in the technocracy that is economically literate, they miss the importance of political economy and the importance of economic philosophy. Most economists in Nigeria pay no heed to these two things, but they are the two most relevant issues to Nigeria's economy.
I have to say, Professor Kingsley Moghalu, it's absolutely fascinating, hugely enlightening talking with you. And I want to thank you very much indeed for coming in today to talk to us. And of course, he is the lawyer, political economist, former deputy governor of the Nigerian Central Bank, and former presidential candidate, Professor Kingsley Moghalu. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you for having me.